No any jokes.
No.
They're beside me.
Competition on.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabriel Adewusi and I want to be the president of your student union.
Hi, my name is Nesson Harper and I'm running for president of Trinity College Dublin Student Union.
Hi, my name is Lynn Rowan and I'm running for president of the SU.
Hi, my name is Conor O'Mara and I'm running for SU President.
Okay, I'll go first. I think my experience to date, I've been a community worker for nearly 15 years now. I've developed many initiatives in terms of responding to drug use, responding to mental health, responding to violence against women, and I've done them under huge budget constraints, which obviously we're experiencing now in the college. Everything is about budget constraints, and I feel that I have just a wealth of experience of responding to issues in them circumstances.
I'm really passionate about the Students' Union and the platform that it can give in terms of raising issues and having a tangible effect on students. I feel in recent years it's been disconnected, and I feel like we need tangible solutions for the problems that are raised. So in terms of my experience, I have been Awareness Officer of Cancer Society and Best Convener and also JCR President. I have experience in campaigns, organisation and financial control, which is what the actual President's job is based on, and that's where I feel I'm able to tick those boxes in terms of bringing experience to the role.
I personally feel that the whole idea of the whole class rep first year, class rep second year, convener third year, some other officer at forum, some sabbatical officer thing. I don't think that's necessary to be president of the Students' Union. I think what's happened is just to be in tune with what the student needs, what the students want, and the best way to represent them. So I feel that in my academic background, I don't know, from TAP, from various societies, various clubs, and the switching between different courses that I've done, I feel like I'm well placed to be representative of a large number of students within our student body. And yeah.
So for me, I had a pretty tough time in first and second year of college, and I learned a lot from the experiences that I came through, and I'd like to take what I learned from those experiences and give back to other students in similar situations to me. I turned things around. I became class rep. I set up my own society. During the summer I represented Trinity in Beijing at an international level. I feel that I'm professional enough to fulfill the role and represent the student body, and I feel that I'm compassionate enough to deal with the individual's needs as well.
I'd say diversity, and I'd say how representative the student union is to the broader student body in Trinity College. I mean, not only in terms of gender, but just in terms of class, in terms of background, in terms of minority groups. I mean, there's so much diversity in Trinity, and I suppose the reason why a small minority are only interacting with the student union is because the student union currently isn't relevant to the wider student body, and that's one thing that needs to change.
I agree with Lynn's points, but I feel like the Students' Union is completely disconnected from students in that it's not completely engaging with the student body and having policies that are going to bring those on board who want to engage and want to have a direct effect on students' life. So that's what I've based all of my points on, tangible things that are actually going to make a difference. So like tackling the accommodation crisis, getting part-time jobs for students, setting up services that are going to have a direct effect on students' lives, and that way they can actually engage with their Students' Union and feel like their Students' Union is really working for them.
I personally feel similar to these my colleagues here that the representation is a big issue in the Students' Union. I recently read an external review that was conducted on the Students' Union about 2 years ago, and the two big flaws was the lack of future planning, which our predecessors have dealt with quite well in the form of the strategic plan and the setting up a board of trustees. But another problem was the issue of representation, and there's no way to get around it because it is something that's necessary. Our class rep system has been touted as one of the best in the country, and it is. But the ultimate fact is, for those little classes we don't elect, for those classes who have class reps who aren't necessarily very interested, they're essentially cut off from the union. So I feel as a result of that, the SU can become very insular, it can become very internal, not through any fault of the individuals who make up council or the sabbatical officers or forum themselves, just as kind of a result. So my approach would be to make the SU a lot more accessible to students, and I've highlighted that in my manifesto. One of the main points, for example, would be to create or put together a structured class representation recruitment campaign, because the current strategy of handing out forms during Freshers Week for however many people take them and sending pestering emails, I just don't feel like that's enough to get a representative body of people in the SU.
For me, I don't think that the Students' Union is a perfect organisation, and I don't think it ever will be. I think that there's a lot of new charges coming in, there's a lot of new student charges, which I'm very against, but if I'm lucky enough to get the position, I think I'll have to wait until the students vote so I can represent their views. I think the most important thing for whoever does become the next Student Union President is to increase the civic engagement of our students. This year Donald's done a great job, and we're the biggest delegation we've had in years at the Education March. But with the general election coming up, and if we want to get the funding that would help us, that would allow us to reinstate the counselling services to what they were, then I think we need to focus on civic engagement, student involvement and student engagement more so than anything else.
Yeah.
Just on that point, I think in terms of our political views, we have to be careful, just because we're on a platform of the four of us are running for president, that we don't put across our views too strongly, as whoever is going to be elected to be the next union president is there to represent. And if that's abortion, or whether that's water charges, or you need to represent the student voice and make sure that Trinity students are being heard. And I suppose what we'd have to look at is working with USI. USI are a great organisation, but what we need to do is work with them but not wait for them. I mean, Trinity can stand on its own 2 feet, and the Students' Union can pose these questions on a national platform and have direct engagement and lobby government for its own views, and make sure that student voices in Trinity are heard, even though you're still working with the USI. So both, I think, is necessary in terms of political views.
I have to agree. Do you want to?
Yeah, like I suppose I can't hide the fact that I'm left-wing. I'm very left-wing. I'm from a working class background, and I think that's really what's going to stand to me in regards mobilising students. I mean, people from disadvantaged areas and from minority groups have been mobilising for years. They've been getting out on the streets, they've been making their voices heard, and I feel that I'm not going to pack away that left-wing side of me, whether it's because of the Students' Union, whether it's because of whoever feels like I should be mandated for a certain thing. I think I will take everything I've learned from being left-wing and I will implement it in regards to mobilising the student body. Like, I mean, if you look at we're saying that there was a good turnout in the last March. That's not a good turnout. 300 people is not a good turnout, and because you can't tell people to arrive, be at this place at this time, and we're all going to march from A to B.
We were the biggest delegation there. So
that doesn't matter.
And aside from that
doesn't matter. Proportional in terms of your students.
Yeah, it was the biggest representation we had. Like,
I couldn't know. It's not.
Well,
the biggest representation. You don't focus on that being the biggest representation. You focus on it not being good enough.
Yeah, that's
300 students might have been exaggerated.
At the same time,
it's not
Lynn,
good
there
enough.
needs to be a starting point. You can't just go from
But there was a
zero
starting
to
point. There was a
1,000
starting
at the same
point
time.
years ago when the marches used to be bigger. So
And
that was lost and it evaporated into
and that
nothing.
starting point has been built up from
Right,
that point.
but what
That's
I'm
the
saying
point of
is
it being
you don't
the
give
biggest-
people a time
biggest
and a place and you
representation.
tell them to show up and we're going to march. You engage them in a process, you engage them 3 months previous. This is happening. We're going to do workshops. We're going to do workshops around mobilisation, around activism, around people power, and then you bring them and you do art workshops with them. You make the signs with them. You make the T-shirts, and you get everybody investing. Trinity is full of talented people, arty people, creative people, and if you get their skills working along with you along a scale, that's where you'll get mobilisation, and that's what's been done by left-wing community activists for years, and it works.
I feel like that kind of mobilisation is the kind of thing that we implement on a regular basis in the Students' Union. When you see any kind of call for help, like say for example, just to call the class rep page, every single time there's something going on, there is a very visible, very audible call for help.
It's not visible on a national front. Nobody gives an absolute shite about a class rep page.
It's nobody outside Trinity gives a shit about a class
But that's
rep
not
page.
going to change student fees. So your student fees, your
I
gender
think
recognition,
the class rep
page is not going to do
it's
anything.
representative of, like I said, the body of representatives in college. It's not going to have a massive impact on fees right now, but
And
at
that's
the
what's
same
wrong.
time, the whole point is that it's there to help mobilize people. And it's part of what I was trying to say earlier when I was saying that if the class rep system is not built up to the way it's supposed to be, then it's essentially completely useless.
But even minus the class reps, like you look at the part-time officers, right? There's really important roles that forget the class reps for a minute, right? You have these part-time officers that are assigned these really specific roles, right? All these issues that come up nationally within the college, you have the gender equality, you have the student parents, you have the mature students, you have the LGBT officer. That system.
From one of your lads as well.
Yeah, I just think on that point, like, yeah, it is important to hear the views of the mature students, the student parents officers, and anybody like that, but also, like, not forget about the class reps, because they're the actual ones in touch with the student body. And I think that it's important. If you're saying that you're coming from a left-wing background, then that's fine, but we're in this position to represent, not to be, like, forcing our opinions on the student body and bringing our thoughts. And
Well,
yes, we need to
I
lobby.
didn't
but
say
it's-
force.
I
I
would
didn't
tend to
actually.
agree
Sorry,
with
I
that.
didn't say force me opinions. I said use me experience as a left-wing activist to mobilise students. That's not talking about a specific issue or a specific area. That's talking about using my left-wing ideology and my left-wing feeling of there's power in people
But
and
the whole
implementing
point
that
of
in
using
Trinity.
the
Okay,
left
Gabriel
wing.
and Nessie, I mean, just in relation to your own political views, is that something that you think is important?
Again.
I think for me personally, I'm not extremely left wing. I'm not extremely right wing. I kind of see myself as probably somewhere in the middle. I agree with a lot of what the student union. I agree with a lot of what the students union decides. Obviously, I have some opinions that differ as well. But I think that the main thing about the role that I'm looking to get into anyway is just to represent that, like, the outcome of the referenda, for instance, for abortion next week, for the fees, and I'm looking forward to representing that and pushing that forward. And then what the student body want, I'm not necessarily here for my own political agenda.
Just on that point,
I would
the
have to-
abortion, we've already had the referendum on abortion, so that was last year, and 72% were in favour of pro-choice, so that's what we have to represent as a student union president, and to lobby nationally for that. And the abortion referendum in Ireland is going to take place during our tenure in office, and that's what we need to represent. And we need to be there every single day, canvassing directly, getting in contact with ministers, getting in contact with whoever we can. Yes, we can work with USI, but we can't wait for them either, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything in our power for the students of Trinity. And I suppose that's kind of where I've started already. I mean, for my manifesto specifically, I'm in communication with the Minister for Health about one of my points already on gay men blood donation. So that's the type of direct lobbying that I would hope to do when I'm in office.
I would tend to agree with some of my colleagues. There is the whole point of being the president, the whole point of running for the presidency is that the whole sense of the president is it's not an individual. While it is an individual that, you know, embodies the role, the whole sense of it is not an individual. It's representative of a wider scope of ideologies, a wider scope of interests, a wider scope of opinions.
But it's
So
going
you
to
have
be
to be
individual skills that can tap into that.
It is
ideology.
individual skills. It is individual skills, definitely. But the whole aspect of whether your ideology falls into one specific area or whether it falls into another is not completely irrelevant. But for the most part, yes, because you're mandated to campaign in a specific regard. Then that's the regard you're going to go to. You're going to
I
focus
think
your
we can-
energies. You're going to focus your.
I think we can all agree that
parts
yes,
into
there
that.
are great skills in Trinity, and we're going to try and mobilise them and work as hard as we can, but at the same time we need to encompass
Pro-choice. I am pro-choice. I think in certain situations it's definitely the right thing to do. I have done some volunteering with the abortion rights campaign outside of college before, but at the same time there are still 30% of people who are voting against it who aren't happy with it. So in terms of how to push forward that for the students' union, I think it's something that has to be considered, and I think it's such a complex and touchy subject for a lot of people and friends of mine personally that I think if I was to move forward with that one, I think I'd move forward with a lot of care and take a lot of time before I make any decision on that one.
I suppose for me, when I think about abortion, I mean, as a woman and as a mother, I suppose it's. I was 15 when I had my daughter, and I suppose I was offered that, you know, my parents sent me down and said, you know, you do have an opportunity to change this. You've left your 15-year-old with no education, you know, and I suppose at the time I chose what was right for me, and that was to become a mother. And I feel that every woman should have that same freedom to make that choice, and within a given time that it doesn't do too much damage to them. It's going to do emotional damage anyway, no matter what the decision is. But I suppose the legislation in Ireland at the minute is that women are having to jump through hoops, and before they know it, they're 4, 5, 6 months gone, and it just makes it more and more impossible. So I would definitely be of the stance that there needs to be freedom to make them choices.
I feel that we need to get back to the core message of what the President's job is, and that is to represent, financially control, organise the Students' Union. And like the opinion of the student body at the minute is over 70% in favour of pro-choice, so that is what I will be representing. Personally, I don't want to infringe my views, but I am actually pro-choice as well. And I think that we need to have a lot of consultation with the student body, following on from what Nessun said. A lot of consultation with the student body, workshops and town hall meetings to see how they want us to progress with it. And that's the sort of open lines of communication that I want to foster.
I also think though, as the President of the Students' Union, we shouldn't only be lobbying for the ability to choose, we also should be lobbying for the services to be implemented with that choice. So you can't just say legalise abortion, you have to be willing to take it them other steps forward. That's not enough to just legalise it. There needs to be counselling services in place, there needs to be a whole multitude of other things that happen with the legalisation of abortion, and I think that should be a step that the student union needs to go that bit further as well.
I personally feel that this whole aspect of pro-choice, pro-life, while it does stand to reason, it can be very dichotomized, and that it makes sense. It's the way people are built, but at the same time, it doesn't need to extend specifically into massive extremes, because there are situations when it would make sense. It would make sense to be able to say, this person, their life is in danger. It doesn't make sense to continue the pregnancy if their personal safety is going to be threatened, and that's where the priority needs to lie. But at the same time, you can't just discount the fact that this is a life that's inside the person that's could be potentially something great. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, I would be more than comfortable campaigning on behalf of the Students' Union on the pro-choice side of things, because like I said earlier, when one steps into the role of president, you step out of your own individuality and you become a body that encompasses a wider community.
So you wouldn't go as far as describing yourself as personally pro-choice?
Not necessarily.
Style of leadership?
I think he's very tokenistic. I think his strategic plan is very tokenistic when you measure it against. I had a meeting last week with Ian Matthews and Geraldine Rowan in regards to the expenditure on college services and the nursery and just generally where the expenditure is going. Then you have the Provost putting out this lovely strategic plan that talks about diversity and talks about increasing non-traditional students, but does absolutely nothing in its expenditure to even sustain the ones that are here. You know what I mean? Like, I know I'm from a non-traditional background. I don't feel supported by Patrick Prendergast in any way. I asked him a question at that council about how he felt that he was going to increase the number of non-traditional students, and he just went, increase the funding to TAP. They don't even fund TAP. You know what I mean? There's no funding in TAP this year, and I just thought it was laughable. Like, he doesn't even know how he's going to do these things, and I just think the students need to remind him that he's making these promises and hold them to him.
I would have to agree with Lynn, especially in that very last point. Sorry, when I said it was nonsense, I was referring to the answer that Patrick Prendergast gave. Like, to just have something just so flippantly mentioned, it's just not something that gives you a lot of confidence that this is something he intends to put a lot of work in. It makes it sound like it's just an ideology that sounds nice on paper. And the fact that, for example, and I know this keeps coming up, but it's relevant and it's here and now. The student charges are coming in so recently after this bright, nice, new, shiny strategic plan was just unveiled. It just gives credit to the fact that this entire document could very well just be, just for show.
Like he said at the last council that the rebranding will only cost 100 grand and that rebranding will last for life. And I went home actually feeling quite disturbed by that, and I couldn't make sense of it at first. And I was like, rebranding will last for life, right? 100 grand, but he's cutting counselling services, something that will save lives. Life lasts for life, education lasts for life, and that 100 grand that he's saying is just 100 grand will save lives. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't understand how he could measure it against a rebranding of the college, so.
I think that Patrick Prendergast quite disengaged with the student body, and the promises that he made when he was running for office was that he would be exemplary in how he would engage with the student body. But I think as SU president, you have to try and foster that relationship first, because at the end of the day, he can actually make things happen. I mean, for example, I had a meeting with the Dean of Students yesterday, and the Dean of Students was able to promise me X, Y, and Z for my manifesto. So for one of my points on accommodation, he has agreed for the Students' Union to be able to directly engage with first years as soon as they get their acceptance letter. And he said, I will run that by the Provost and that'll be no problem. So I think what we need to do is try and engage with the Provost even more, because we're better if we can stand together. But at the same time, I understand that he's cutting all these services and we do need to fight them. So I have no problem being controversial when the time actually arises and being argumentative and raising these points with the Provost. But at the same time, we need to try and foster a relationship where we actually get things moving rather than being at a standstill.
Yeah, like I'd agree with some of what you said there, Conor, but I think taking the Dean of Students at his word when we've been lied to so many times by the board. I know, but like I think taking him at his word, I think for now, I don't think it's something I could do. Personally, my feelings, to answer the question of the Provost, are they're quite mixed. I mean, the Provost has made this fantastic strategic plan. He's the college is hopefully bringing in a more diverse range of students. He's the first Provost to ever come to council.
I'm not sure how possible bringing a diverse range of students is if you're
can I finish really quick?
Pushing out every other diverse range of students.
But so in terms of like he's the first Provost to come to student council. He has a strategic plan. He's trying to push Trinity forward. So part of me is like, oh, he is progressive, but then when you hear things like the student charges, it's like being slapped in the face. It's like, and you're getting slapped in the face with these charges, and obviously I'm in my 4th year of a 5-year degree, so it's not going to have a huge impact on me. But I have a little sister. There's so many students as well in the college, and there's a lot of people coming through who are going to be slapped with those charges, and so it's mixed feelings towards the Provost.
It's even worse to consider the fact that we in the transition, like I'm in 3rd year. If I was elected, then I'd only be going into 4th year. But we in the transition, we're very aware of what's happening. But eventually, if these student charges do come into play, it'll just become the norm, and none of the students who come afterwards will ever realise that there was anything better afterwards.
I think the Provost isn't in touch with on-the-ground students and what they actually want. Things like library hours, he doesn't seem to have these problems communicated with them, and that's what we need to focus on. So I wouldn't be calling him progressive.
Yeah, and that's
last question on frequent use of direct action and in past years.
definitely
I
for
would
me.
definitely be also, yeah. As I said earlier, lobbying is something that's been absent from the president's role for a good few years now. It's something that we've kind of just given up to the USI, kind of as a, here, take it and do all my work for me. But I definitely would advocate.
There's a master's in minute, and it's a master's in activism, and it would be most of my friends who would be the lecturers on that. And I mean, that's what's needed. You know, take that if it actually warrants a master somewhere, it shows how much it's needed in their society in terms of trying to get people out and people lobbying to change things. And I feel like that we could take, you know, as me, if I was to be the president, I would try and mimic that masters on a smaller scale and kind of roll it out as some workshops in Trinity College, so that we could have more effective lobbying. And I think presidents change every year, right? But if you actually ignite something in people and they feel the power of having thousands of people around them fighting for something, that will live on when I'm gone. You know what I mean? So it's just about re-sparking that, get that going again. So lobbying will be one of the biggest parts of everything I do if I am president.
Yeah, I think lobbying is really important, and Trinity can it can stand on its own 2 feet and have a national platform to have its voice heard. And like as SU president, you're meant to do everything in your power, work 24/7 to make sure the Trinity voices are heard. But at the same time, I would also like to foster like a discussion about things that are actually affecting on the ground student lives at the minute in Trinity. So whether that's just things like part-time jobs and whatnot, or whether it is more the more controversial issues like abortion, I think we need to foster a communication between both of them. So lobbying, but also direct engagement with students with the student services.
I think we've all mentioned that we're all very interested in lobbying and student engagement a few times now, so I don't have a lot to add to that, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm going to be probably personal or something here. In the past few months since I got involved with the Students' Union, I suppose I was kind of on the outskirts of student life, probably how I've been all my life, on the outskirts of society, on the outskirts of student life, and I just thought, you know what, the same inequalities that are existing here, why aren't I part of student life here in Trinity, why aren't I getting the same thing here? And I became the first ever student parents rep, and I realised how important that involvement was, just in that structure of how all of a sudden I felt like a student. And I've spent the last few years not feeling like a student, and I just felt that it was really important to try and make the students' union representative enough, relevant enough, and so that everybody can actually get the experience that I now know can actually happen by being involved with college life and with the students' union.
My experience would be similar to Lynn's, but slightly different in that I wouldn't have felt I was on the outskirts of college life. I would have felt personally that I was immersed in it, you know, all the societies, all the sports, all the clubs, going to all the little things after college hours, going to as many and as few lectures, depending on your mood, all that kind of thing, what really makes you a student in any kind of higher level institution. I was really immersed in all of that, except the students' union. So to put it more clearly, I was like really aware of the perception that students outside the students' union would have of the students' union. Those guys over there that do all the things that have nothing to do with me. That would have been the perception I had, and I know it's the perception a lot of students would have had. But until I was elected as the first ever access officer, I never realised the kind of just sheer power for change the SU can stand for. And since then, it's really motivated me to move forward, and that's a big part of why I want to be the president.
Do you want to go, Connor?
You fire ahead.
So
Just thinking.
the reason for me why I ran for student union president is because I feel like I've had not necessarily experience in terms of being access officer. I didn't come in through TAP. I've had almost every experience at Trinity. I came into first year. I was unlucky that an immediate family member of mine passed away, so I had repeats. I've done that side of college. I struggled there. I had super repeats a few weeks after that, and it was the time in between. It was those 2 weeks I had to study, which were very pressurised. That I learned a lot about myself, and I developed a very strong understanding of myself from the experience I had. I learned